We're going to go over the absolute fastest way that you can improve your bench press, and we're going to start right now. Okay, so when we're looking at research, one of the things that I like to think through is it actually applicable? We're looking at a research paper where we saw some individuals increase their bench press literally in 35 days by 35+%, multiple athletes. And these are individuals who had benched before, and they were adding 20, 30, 35 pounds to their bench literally by following this protocol, okay? And it's a pretty simple freaking protocol. It's pretty intensive, but it's very easy to follow. So that's something that I think everybody wants to do. You know, you go to the gym and you're like, I want to freaking take my bench from 300, to 350. Based off of this, if I look at it, I go, okay, can I increase my bench by, 20% if I'm benching 300? Then we're looking at that and we're saying, okay, that's going to be 40, 50 pounds. Can we do that? Can I bench 340 in 37 days? And based off of the research paper that we're going to analyze, it's actually true. You actually can do it. And this is a recent paper from February of 25. And so what we're looking at here is we're looking at the efficacy of daily 1 rep max bench press on men and women. And that's something that I want to get into, is that this paper is actually really freaking interesting. It's not a huge number of people. It's 7 athletes. But the way that they set it up, it's pretty neat because they sort of copy a research paper from 2016 from, I think, Michael Zordos is his name. If I remember correctly, I follow him on Instagram, and even he did a test with back squats with 3 individuals. They did this for about 35 days. They would max out every single day on the back squat, and they wanted to see at the end of that back squat period in 35 days, what could we see as an increase on the back squat? Now, they base this for bench press because I think, historically speaking, in the strength and conditioning world, at least in my experience personally as well, it's been much more normal to talk about squatting every day. And I don't really know why that is relative to bench press or even to deadlift. I think there's always been, I think with deadlift, I remember for a while, Louis Simmons was talking about, deadlift every 12 to 14 days or like once every 2 weeks, something like that. A lot of power lifters sort of follow that as gospel, like, just deadlift heavy every 2 weeks and you'll be fine. Even though I did do a thing back in 2018 where I deadlifted 600 pounds every single day for 14 days. That was on Instagram. One thing I want to go back to is that when we're thinking about squatting every day, we've talked about on the channel front squatting every day for 2 straight years, literally every single day for 2 straight years, and how that took my front squat from like a 150 up to like 215. Inside of our system of training, we will use a squat every day program probably once a year for about 6 to 8 weeks. If you're a weightlifter or you're a power lifter, you can get on this program inside of our strength training app, Peak Strength. Just head over to peakstrength.app, the Google Play Store or the Apple iOS Store. We've got a whole bunch of different sports, but specifically towards weightlifting and powerlifting as well. Now, one of the things that I want to talk about is that if you're looking at deadlifting every day, that's not really common, right? Squatting every day, front squatting every day, a bit more common. Doing weightlifting movements every day, that's a bit more common, at least in the weightlifting realm. Not as much for sports performance, but in the weightlifting realm. Benching every day has never really been that common. Okay, so what these researchers did is they actually took the Zordos study on back squat and they said, hey, let's try something similar for bench press. And so when I first heard about this paper specifically, I was very hesitant to actually think it would work. I wanted to see where the athletes started, and I wanted to see, is it realistic? And then when can we use it? And I think that's the big factor that I want to go into at the end here is like, what were they doing? But then when can we actually apply this? So Samford University, they take this, they prepare, they get 7 students, and they get them set up. They go through all these different specific types of tests. They do a questionnaire. Okay. And I think this is really important because we're looking at, different numbers. And if we just have, I actually like the fact that they just numbered these individuals, right? And they're looking at it and they're going, okay, we got a 23-year-old, 21-year-old, a 22-year-old, a 21, a 25, 23, and a 22. Okay. So pretty much everybody's early 20s except for one person. And then we're looking at what I wanted to do. And I think that this is an important thing, is we look at frequency prior to the test, and then we look at the actual max. Okay, so when we're looking at the frequency, 1 to 2 times a week for 2 years. That's pretty normal. 1 to 2 times a week. One time a week for 4 years was the second person. 1 time a week for 2 years. Now, the interesting part here is like this one individual trained for 4 years and the other individual trained for 2 years, but they never really maxed before, which it's like, I don't know if I fully buy that, but okay, maybe they just felt bad about their max. I don't know. Now, participant 4, they had 115 pound max, and again, about 1 time per week. Okay, so 1 time per week. And then we got a 1.5 year of training, 1 to 2 times, and they were benching 180, right? So that's pretty good, solid, not bad. The 23-year-old, 7 years of training. I would think the participant number 6 is a female. If they're training 7 years and they're only benching 145, I would assume that. So 145. And then we have the individual who's 2 to 3 times a week and they bench 305. Okay, so 2 to 3 times a week for 8 years. And they bench 305. So this individual's highly likely a dude. So we're seeing, I know that it's split I want to say it was 4 women to 3 men. The way that I found this to be interesting is that they literally copied everything from Zordos. And I even want to bring this up here, and I want to highlight this, is that in addition to the training protocol and in alignment with Zordos's protocol, the participants consume 5 grams of creatine, monohydrate, 200 to 360 milligrams of caffeine, approximately 30 minutes. Now, I would have preferred that they say let's say 4 milligrams per kilo or something like that. So if you have somebody that weighs 100 kilos, they're going to have 400 milligrams. So there's a little bit more of a standard amongst the body weight, but something like that. Now, after each session, they consumed another 5 grams. So they were getting 5 grams pre, 5 grams post, and then they're doing that with 20 grams of protein. Now, the interesting thing that I wanted to point out here, because we have had this individual on the podcast that we do right here. We got right here the effects of creatine supplementation during resistance training, Scott Forbes. Okay, so we got Scott Forbes here. So he's one of the researchers, and we've had him on here. I also want to point out here, John Garhammer, good friend. We've also had him on the podcast, and he's actually moving back to our area, one of the greatest researchers of all time. So we got some really good research that they're citing. And it's pretty cool to see that and then come back up here now and say, okay, that's part of the procedure. So they're taking 5 grams. So if we're an athlete, let's say we're an athlete watching and we want to be like, I want to add this crazy amount to my bench press. Okay. Start with getting your creatine. You get 5 grams pre, you take your caffeine pre, you train, and you take this about 30 minutes before each training session. Then you're gonna take 5 grams post-workout with 20 grams of protein as well. Now, the one thing I also want to bring up, so that's like the standard supplementation, right? Now, I'm interested to see how well do these people follow through. I had done a research paper once as a subject, and it was like a social setting type research thing. And we had to go, I think it was 6 times, and then as freshmen, and then 6 times as seniors. And it was interesting because one of the measurements was like people wouldn't show up. So it's interesting to see how well people can hold themselves accountable and how poorly they can hold themselves accountable. Now, because that does factor into training. So let's set the scene here, okay? Based off of these 7 participants, when we're looking here, they followed a daily 1 rep max in training protocol. Okay, so literally every single day they would go to max. Now, we have to remember, if we're training as an athlete or as a person who just wants to increase their bench, some days you will bench higher, some days you will bench lower, okay? Some days when we've done Bulgarian style training for squats or for snatches, there's some days you feel like dog crap. There's some days that you feel like you just feel like a phenom. There's some days you can't sleep, some days you can sleep. A lot of that can be related to the way that your body is struggling to recover. And I've actually had talks about this in some of our videos on overtraining and my CNS is fatigued. there's ways that you can actually tell if it's your nervous system that's fatigued or if it's a metabolic issue that's fatigued, based off of when or how you're struggling to fall asleep, or if you fall asleep and you wake up early. That's some all interesting stuff. We've done videos on my CNS is fried. That's an old school video that we did that goes into this. Now, for 34 straight days, each participant performed the bench press, starting with finding their 1 RM, followed by 5 volume sets. Now, I'm going to call everybody out really quick here before we get into this. I genuinely have an interest based off of this chart, okay? I wanted everybody to comment with their current PRs. Okay, so how many people watching this bench video, what is your current PR? And you don't have to lie about it. Just say, this is my current PR. I train 1 to 2 times a week on the bench press. My current PR is 155. My current PR is 305. My current PR is 275. Because I want to tally this and see from this information relative to this study, like, is it a representation of of people who are interested in fitness? I'm interested in that. Like, so if you guys can comment about that, let us know what your current bench press is. And then the interesting part that I want to add on is when we get through this, I want you to reply to your comment and see where you would be if you would follow through with this strategy. Okay. So let's get through the strategy now. The volume sets alternated between 2 strategies. First one, 5 sets of 3 reps at 85%. So you bench 100 kilos on that specific day. You're doing 5 triples at 85 kilos. Okay, pretty cut and dry. Or they do 5 sets of 2 at 90% of the daily 1 RM. So you're lifting pretty high intensity-wise. And then each participant had the freedom to choose which volume set strategy to follow each day. So that's interesting. It's not great for the research paper, but it still makes it probably a little bit easier to follow through with. Now, this is where they set up a taper. Ironically, we were just talking about this. This is in one of our recent lives, our channel member lives. I went into the model of peaking that we use, and it's like at the very, very end of our video, where we're talking about what was it? It's the channel member video on how we're going through exercise identification and stuff like that, and then we go into actual peaking and what exercises to use when we're peaking. And I think having a taper model is really important. I would rather call it a peak model versus a taper model, because taper is a type of model you could use. The participants perform 5 sets of 1 rep of 90 to 100% of their first day's 1 RM on day 35. Okay, so basically, let's say you bench 100 kilos, you hit 5 singles there, and that's on day 35. Then you have day 36, then you have day 37. They're rest days. You don't do anything. And then the final day on day 38, that's when we're going ham. Okay, so all the participants completed the 1 RM protocol in public fitness centers, self-reporting their daily performance throughout the training period. So this is another thing, like the adherence to it, 100%, did they actually do it? I hope so. We have to trust them. The day coincided with the competition. Day 38 coincides with the competition. That was at Samford University. Based off the numbers we're about to see, I would assume they did a pretty good job following through on this. I hope they did. Now, in addition to the training protocol, and in alignment with Zordos, this is where we get into the protein, the creatine, the caffeine. So don't forget this part now. Okay. What they did then, they want to look at the percent change. Okay. So if I have a 100K bench and it goes up 30 pounds, that's a 30% increase. Okay. Based off of the numbers. And what I think is interesting here is the daily 1 RMs, they were divided into quartiles. And this is, as soon as I read this was part of like my notes on my application, was like, I liked the thought of saying, I set up my test, right? And I want to test this so that we can go through, let's say, give myself 4 months, and at the end of each month, we have a built-in test. Okay. So this is a type of flying assessment. And I want to say this as well, is that I truly think having flying assessments and having very static assessments are key. I think they're both phenomenal. The way we set up our training system here, and we're putting this together, we've released this in books, or we've talked about this on podcasts, is that we have assessments it's literally every 13 to 16 weeks. It's most of the time 13 weeks, depending on based off of how the quarters fall through with our on-site gym. So those would be quarters for the year. Okay. Now that's quarters for the year. It'd be interesting to have specific goals. And then every month you have these flying assessments, which is essentially how they set this up. The daily 1RMs are their flying assessments. And then the quartiles are done, they attempted a 1 rep max over 35 days. So each quartile included 8 to 9 days. So basically you could have this like steadfast, static 8 to 9 days, take that. That's this. And then you have the flying along the way. So you look at this, an average 1RM was calculated for each quartile to examine progressive strength trends. The reason why I like this is because you could see specific people based off of their personality types, their aggressive levels, their recovery, their jobs, stuff like that. And it would make peaking pretty freaking good. And I really think I'm going to implement this. As soon as I read this, I was like, man, I could do this a little bit clearer, where I have a monthly assessment. I have the flying assessments. I have the static assessments, and then you have your competition assessments, right? Which is like, how good of an athlete are you? How are you competing? Let's look at this. The results. Table 2 displays the day 1, day 38, and peak 1RMs for each participant, and then percent change for day 1 and peak 1RM, and the values for days. The participants gained an average of 40 pounds. 40 pounds. Okay, so they went up 29.2%. 29.2% from day 1 to peak. So that's insane. Like, that's freaking crazy. And remember, these people were trained. They're not specimens. They're not freaks of nature. But that also means, like, if they're not freaks of nature, their bench isn't going to go up as fast. And I want to go into how I'm thinking about using this. I have a wrestler on site that I have thought with 2 tests. And I've done this. We've talked about this with squats with 2 of our football players that were really tall. And it worked for 12 weeks with squats. So listen to this. Person 1, okay, their bench was 155, okay, initially. They went up 25.9%. They went up 35 pounds, okay, 35 pounds. Person 2, 25 pounds. They had never maxed before, but so we can see what they ended up maxing. They went up 25 pounds. Person 3, never maxed before. They went up 30 pounds. Okay, person 4, 39%, 45 freaking pounds. The 4th person had benched 115. They benched 45 more pounds, dude. What the hell? Now the next one, this one's crazy. The next number is absolutely insane. 41% in 35 days, 38 days, 41%. That's 70 freaking pounds. 70 pounds. Like, literally, if you bench 350 and you try this, like, in theory, the absolute number might even be higher. But if you looked at it, you said, all right, like 35% increase. Dude, now you're benching 405 just from doing this for a freaking 1 month. Now, there's some risks here. There's some serious risks. Okay. There's 2 more people here. 33.33% for person 6. That person had bench 145. They went up 45 pounds. And then person 7, this was the dude that was benching 2 to 3 times a week. 13.7%. So it's a lot lower. Fair. He's got more experience. He's got more volume of training. He's got, a lot. He's not going to adapt as quickly as some of these other people who I would assume are much more untrained. Now, just remember what I talked about. The absolute increase, because his bench was higher, he was at 305. He benched 340. He went up 35 freaking pounds. So again, remember, you bench 350 and you go up 13.7%, you're benching 400 pounds. So I hope everybody has put their numbers in relative. So put their numbers in down below. And then I want you to reply to your chat, to your comment, and say, okay, based off of, let's just say a normal number of 25%. Based off a 25% increase, my 185 would be this. My 225 would be this. Okay, so here's where we can see the females. Okay, so the females were the first four. And the average female on the first day benched 116. On day 38, they benched 145 on average, pretty close, within 20 pounds across the board. And then on the peak day, they did a 135. Okay, so some of them actually, so they did a 135 on peak day. A lot of them had, oh wow, this one person. So this is another interesting one, and I want to highlight this here. Look at this right here, but look at the first two. Look at day 38 to this. This is really interesting, okay? Because this could help as a coach. If you're peaking someone, especially in powerlifting, you could look at this and say, okay, this person benched 135, then 155. Then they took a 2-day rest, and they added 15 pounds. Now, this person took a 2-day rest, and they didn't add anything. This person, 2-day rest, they didn't add anything. This person, a little bit. So you can tinker around, because some people who are much more high-wired recover really well with those 2 days of rest. They'll blow up. Some people that are slower twitch don't. So that's an interesting thing to keep in mind. And I also want to point this out. The number here, 29.03, and the number here, 29.41, female percentage to male percentage is almost identical. Okay, that's like legitimately an interesting number to look at, because it's pretty freaking tight. The thing that is a disparity for the men is we're looking at these three, and we're looking at someone was, 170 to 220 to 240. Yo, this dude went up 20 pounds from 2 days of rest. Yo, that's crazy. Also, I'm looking at something right now. I just realized this. Okay, so, and I didn't see this conversation. Okay, so this dude went 20 pounds increase from 2 days rest. That's huge. Now, participant 7. Okay, this is interesting. They maxed 255. They had 285. Then they hit 290. What I'm going to go back to is this is the same person that benched. Previous all-time was 305. So they're not using that at all. It's just like, hey, this is the experience. So this person must have benched 305 a couple years prior. Maybe they lost a lot of weight, and now they're trying to get back to being swole. They still saw, a 35-pound increase. So it's interesting that I actually would have thought that would be faster just based off of the recent stuff we've seen on muscle memory. Okay, so I wanted to point that out because that was an interesting thing I thought about there. It was like, wow, that was different from what we had seen up top. But still, look at the numbers. So it really seems like where you're going to see huge payoff for dudes is around the 170 to 200 to 225 mark. That's where you're going to see a big payoff. So they all peaked before day 38 of the protocol. Additionally, each participant. So this is where I wanted to see the quartiles, because this is where I would take the information and I would go quartiles versus 2-day rest. And then you could see how the volume is accumulating and how they're handling that. Because you can look here and you can see a 15% change. This is pretty substantial. This person goes down after the second quartile, and then they skyrocket back up. So when I talk about the athlete reaction, this would be like a type 3 individual. This would be more so a type 1. This would be much more of a type 1. This person here would probably be a 2, because it's like 2 stable plots where it's like stable, then there's a big spike, and it's stable. And I would suspect that this person would probably have a drop off later. And then it would be another spike. It would be a little bit more up and down. Now, this one, these are interesting. And I would like to see over a long period of time, there was only one that actually had a negative impact with an adaptation period. And I'm interested to see, based off of that, what was their commitment level. So when we're looking at this here, we're seeing the plot and like the actual success along the way. And what's freaking cool here is just like the mean, so the average 1 rep max during each quartile and change, it's still pretty similar, except the mean for females much higher. The change is much higher. Change is, so it's actually like this high maxing out is actually really good for women, like really good, which is freaking crazy. I mean, it's cool. It's cool to see stuff like this because it sucks that it's only 7 people, right? But you can look at it and be like, hey, there's some application here. Now, if we're looking at this, like the primary purpose, I want to go over this. We're seeing the breakdowns here. The main finding was that all 7 participants saw positive correlations. The positive increase in the 1RM from day 1 to their peak was as follows. I think that's cool. These results support our hypothesis that it's a skill. Maxing out is a skill. And it's important to recognize that. And these reinforce the notion that highly specific training can produce substantial strength gains. And the specificity is to the bench. We want to increase the bench, we do this. Now, people are going to be like, well, that means sports-specific training works. Calm down here. We're just talking about doing a bench really heavy will increase the ability to bench heavy. Okay, so just relax on this stuff. Don't jump to conclusions and pretend that now doing overhead banded split squat will help us with volleyball. Okay, that's like one thing that we got to relax on, all you functional people. I just really stereotyped everybody. Sorry. Zordos et al., while they demonstrated the effectiveness of the protocol in well-trained competitive male powerlifters, this is the first to investigate the efficacy of 1RM and volume in physically active, non-competitive. So they're physically active, but they didn't compete, men and women. And this is where I want to get into what we talked about. They actually cite the they actually cite the pre-workout and where they got the scoops from. That's freaking hilarious. All 7 participants experienced periods of decline in their 1RM throughout the program, which was expected given the physically demanding nature of the protocol. Each participant reported substantial fatigue. 3 participants experienced pain that hindered their ability to complete some training sessions. Specifically, participant 1 developed shoulder pain, which led to the missing of 1 training session, the omission of volume sets, and 2 others. Okay. So 1 was a little banged up. Participant 2 experienced pain in the triceps, preventing her from completing the volume sets. Participant 7 had shoulder pain. So we're looking at 4 out of 7 had injuries. Now they're not competitive-based athletes, so we don't know how high their pain and discomfort tolerance is. The total number of missed sessions and adherence rates for the participants are shown. So adherence is still 90%. Missed days was on average only 4. That's pretty freaking good. This person only missed once. That's great. This one was injured or flaky. You know, they're college kids. The odds of them actually being hurt versus being hungover and not showing up, we don't know. Sorry, I was in college and that was me. So I think that is something to just be aware of. Like, there could be some things behind the scenes that they didn't report on. But this is still pretty freaking good, dude. 90% adherence rate's fantastic. Like, that's good. Now, to compare this, the average absolute increase in bench and the average percentage increase were calculated. Additionally, 1RMs were divided into quartiles. There was a notable difference in the absolute increase in bench. It was a plus 50 pounds for men. Females was 33 pounds. The relative gains, though, were similar. So we're looking at percentages. Percentages were very similar. And I think this actually goes back to the discussion of, like, women can get as strong women can increase strength at the same rate. That's the big one there. Females demonstrated a higher relative change in strength when comparing quartiles. That's interesting, which may indicate a more consistent progressive trend in strength gains for females. So going through this, now we're seeing, like, let's just go back, cover this. Participant 1, because I want to get into my thoughts and what I think we can do in training. And I have like three settings, three ways that I think that people watching could take this and try. I think I have also something that I want to try. And then one thing that I think would be relatively easy to experiment with without like really disrupting what you're doing. Okay. And this sort of falls in line. I've talked about the 50 clap push-ups every single day until you bench 315. It literally falls in line with that. Like just training volume and training a specific pattern regularly can drastically increase the way we're doing this. And just keep in mind, they were taking protein. They were using creatine. Participant 1, 35 pounds, 26%. 2, they did 25-pound increase, 23% about. Participant 3, 30 pounds, 28.5%. Participant 4, 45 pounds, 39%. I do wish they would have included their body weights here. I wish we saw, like, what do they weigh? Because that would be another interesting factor, is that based off of their body weight and their gain, what was that comparison? Participant 5, now we're getting into the dudes here. 70-pound increase, 70 pounds, 41%. Participant 6, 45 pounds, 33%. Participant 7, 35%. So despite the positive results, 3 participants, so it was 3, not 4, I miscalculated. 3 participants had pain, and all the participants basically missed training due to travel or time constraints. I always love that when college kids are like, yeah, I don't have any time. Shut up, you're in college. But also, you probably were traveling to go home or something, so I'll give you that one. Many questions remain regarding the optimal length of the training protocol. I think that's where I wanted to go. Was my first thought was I wanted to take something like this and say, okay, actually, look at this one. Creatine supplementation improves muscular performance without additional impact on the cardiovascular training. Okay. What I wanted to do was take this and say, what if you did 35 days? So let's say you did a 4-week block. So if you're inside of peak strength, right? You're like, all right, I'm going to bench every single day. So let's say you train 5 days a week. Okay. You train 5 days a week. And I think I want to go back up and look at methods because I don't think they ever clarified if there was any days off. For 34 consecutive days. Like they said, literally every single day, consecutive days, day after day after day after day. That's actually cool. Consecutive days right there. So I think because in the procedures, they're saying consecutive days, it's every single day. Now, going off of this, I think that's pretty hard. It's hard to get to the gym every single day. I would make this plea. Okay. Let's say in peak strength, you do your exposure phase, you bench every single day that you train, okay? And then during your comprehension phase, so it's the second round of 4 weeks, let's say you do military press or dips or something. Let's say you do dips every single day. And the goal would be, and this is where I would alter it slightly, one day it would be a pump, one day strength. One day pump, one day strength. So on the pump days, you got to get 50 reps. On the strength days, you got to get 15 reps and their 5 triples or 5 doubles with a couple max outs. Like, so you set it up that way. That's one way I was thinking through it. The second thing, this is related to the wrestler I have on site. He's a freshman. He benched like 245, almost made it to states. He's strong. He's power clean, 235. He's a 152 pounder. And I train him. I actually think I could get this kid to bench every single day that he would come into the gym. So I'm actually thinking about having him bench every single day and to see what happens. Now, his left shoulder was banged up after the season. I'm going to talk to him about it because I was actually thinking this would be a good workout for Coy to do, a good program. Now, off of that, okay, so you pick one person, you talk to him, do you want to try this, see if we can get a big push, see if we can blow up their max bench. We just did our assessments 2 weeks ago, so we know where he's at, and we run it. We see what happens. The thing that I'd say with that is that we would still do a decent amount of accessory work as well. So like that could have a negative impact. My D2 football guys also come back today. I was going to talk to them about it for fun. Now, the third point that I thought would be you could even go back and forth between max bench dumbbell bench, max bench, dumbbell bench, and the pump would be the dumbbell bench. The max out would be on the barbell. The issue I have with something like this, if you're somebody who's benching like 315 plus, I do think you're going to get injured a little bit quicker. I think it's just a little bit riskier for those individuals than for an individual who is a little bit weaker. I also want to bring up, I think this could be a really fantastic way that if you're looking for a peak, you run something like this very well, and then the last 4 weeks, so you do it 4 weeks and then you back off for another 4 weeks where you don't do it as frequently, but you get this big bump and then you try and ride that through until you would have a competition. That was another thought process I have. I think the final thought process for all coaches, all athletes watching, is that the big takeaway here is that when you do something a lot, you get really good at that something. And so if you have somebody whose squat sucks, you squat a lot. If their clean sucks, they clean a lot. If their snatch sucks, you snatch a lot. Bench a lot. Pull-ups, pull up a lot. Jumps, you do a lot of jumps, but I would actually only do it twice a week. I think that's like the ultimate takeaway for me. I am going to implement this with somebody on site. I'm going to talk to some people. We're going to set it up. It's going to be fun to follow through on. And I just genuinely enjoy this type of paper. And the thing is like, in the realm of strength and conditioning, does it suck that this could have been a little bit longer, or they could have had more participants? Yeah. But like strength and conditioning and the testing, it's so floaty. Like there's no real clear-cut data. There's such an art to strength and conditioning, and there's science. And this is one of those where I'm like, yo, I don't know. You give me 10 people and you put them on the 35-day program like this, they're probably going to do really well. I would do some shoulder work, shoulder maintenance work, and pec stretching, stuff like that, scorpion work. I freaking love this. I hope you guys enjoy this. Hey, make sure you comment down below with where your current max is, and then where it would be if you had like a 25 to 30% gain. I really want to use that for some data, and we'll come up with something based off this. Maybe we even make a future video for you guys, and maybe we even run through with one of our athletes on site. We do this for 35 days, and we can report back. I hope this is something that you guys enjoyed. If you need this type of training, you need training to get you guys to the next level, head over to peakstrength.app, the Google Play Store or the Apple iOS Store if you want more content like this. Click on this card right here, because remember, freaks, if you want to become a champion, you've always got to cultivate your power. Peace.